It's Tuesday, October 9th. Welcome to Market Foolery. I'm Chris Hill. Joining me in studio today, Jim Mueller. How are you?
Hey, Chris. It's good to be here.
Thanks for being here. We've got Netflix cutting yet another big check. We'll get to that. We'll get to an earnings preview. We got to start with the story that broke yesterday afternoon after we had taped yesterday's Market Foolery. And that is Google shutting down Google Plus, which honestly, I wasn't even aware was still a thing. For those unfamiliar, and I'm assuming that's most people, Google Plus was Google's attempt at a social network.
Right.
The first news, and by the way, there have been multiple reports on this story from mainstream media outlets that are just out and out referring to this using some version of the word failed. Google Plus, comma, the failed social network that
right.
Google, now, joking aside, they're shutting it down because there was a breach of some sort, a security breach.
Yeah, they messed up.
That happened 6 months ago.
Oh, no. It started as early as 2015. They just discovered it 6 months ago.
Oh, this is getting better all the time. So, I mean, I think there are a couple of threads I want to pull here, and we'll get to the security one in a second. But I'm a little surprised, all joking aside, I'm a little surprised that Google Plus was still around because of Ruth Porat, who's been the chief financial officer at Alphabet for a couple of years now, has done a phenomenal job. And I just assume anything that is running at Alphabet has gotten Ruth Porat's sign off. And when I saw the news that Google Plus was being shut down, before I knew anything about the security issue, I just thought, wow, I would have assumed that thing was killed years ago.
Yeah, because Facebook, right? So,
their attempt to compete with Facebook.
Right. And they were already behind when they started. The Wall Street Journal had a great quote by Youssef Squali. Google was trying to be more powerful than the Pope when they launched it. And the Pope in this case being Facebook in this. But why would you... It shouldn't have taken several years for them to figure out that they're not going to catch up. And so why keep it open?
So my assumption is they kept it open because at least on some level there was a business case somewhere. Maybe in and of itself it was not a profitable entity, but it tied into other things that they were doing because they kept it going. I mean, it's been failing for a long time. They've kept it going, and now they're shutting it down because this discovery of this breach, which they didn't reveal 6 months ago because they thought it would make them look bad.
Well, you have to remember that's when the Cambridge Analytica and Facebook story was still very much in the news, and everyone was being grilled by Congress. And Google, Alphabet apparently didn't want to do that, or didn't want to play in the same field there, even though now the story has come out as it does, and it's not so much that there was a breach that they didn't. It was that they didn't report it at the time, and so it's not the sin, it's the cover up that makes people even more upset. And I think people have a right. I mean, and even the reporting on this, they say they didn't have a lot of activity logs on the people who the activity that these app designers were doing. They haven't talked to any of the app designers. They just looked at some and noticed their profiles, and they hadn't had any complaints, and so they figured nothing probably happened, and so we're good.
And in fact, maybe nothing nefarious was going on. But as you said, I mean, it's the cover-up. And on top of which, part of my reaction to this story is you're supposed to be good at this, aren't you? Isn't Alphabet supposed to be good at security? I expect a little bit, but rightly or wrongly, I expect more from Alphabet when it comes to data security and being able to prevent any kind of a breach. I expect more from them than I do from Home Depot.
I don't know why.
I was going to say just to pick one like random retailer that in the last few years has said,
or Target or somebody like that. But no, Google has this whole history of security problems. I mean, when Gmail was first launched, don't you remember the big hoopla? They were scanning people's emails to then serve them ads better, and people pushed back and they said, okay, students and businesses and government users of this, we won't do that. But they only just recently stopped doing that for everyone else on Gmail. And then on the Street View, the cars with the cameras, for their Google Maps, the Street View, you can go down and see what the business looks like or your home. They were, air quotes, inadvertently picking up data from unsecured Wi-Fis, such as URLs or passwords from people's homes. I mean, so having high expectations of Google is nice, but it hasn't been really borne out. And I think it speaks more to the whole issue about big data. I mean, Facebook's Cambridge Analytica story, Target's and Home Depot's and everyone else's breaches, in that defense is hard because the offense always has the advantage, and they're going to find those loopholes. They're going to find those holes. And it's hard to imagine what all can be done with this stuff.
Do you think let me back up. When Facebook recently had the departure of the executives from Instagram and the folks from WhatsApp and that sort of thing, one of the things we were kicking around in the office was, boy, if you're doing acquisitions for another big tech company, that's probably a nice talking point. Hey, you should let us buy us instead of Facebook, because look at what happens with those people. In that same vein, I think if you're whoever is in charge of advertising, the burgeoning advertising business at Amazon, I think you got to like this news, because it's one more talking point for potential advertisers. Like, oh, well, maybe cut down a little bit of your spend with Google and come on over to Amazon. Well,
but just like Facebook was dominant in social media back at the time, Google was the dominant player, the dominant source. I mean, Google's a verb now. It's not just the name of the company.
Let's move on to the entertainment industry. Shares of Netflix up a little bit this morning on the news that Netflix is buying ABQ Studios, ABQ short for Albuquerque, based in New Mexico. ABQ Studios, producer of, or I should say home to several television shows, most notably Better Call Saul. I didn't see a price tag associated with this. I'm assuming they didn't have to reveal that.
Nothing's been announced, and it's not even a done deal yet, though the people from Albuquerque and the state of New Mexico are talking as if it is a done deal.
I was going to say, wasn't there an event with like the governor of New Mexico and the mayor and that sort of thing?
But for one thing, since the city of Albuquerque is contributing some funds, the city council has to approve the deal. And so that hasn't happened yet. But yeah, it looks like a nice deal for Netflix. They have Albuquerque Studios, which has been on for sale for a few years now. It has 9 sound stages, production offices, a back lot, has been the site for some filmings such as Godless and Longmire, The Ballad of Buster Scruggs, which I actually want to see.
Well, that's the new Coen Brothers movie,
That's
right?
the new Coen Brothers. Yeah. And even the Avengers, 2012 movie Avengers was filmed at ABQ.
So this seems to be right in line with the move that Netflix had a little while ago, moving their headquarters to Los Angeles. I mean, I don't know. I think if you're anyone else in the movie business, you have to be viewing this news with a little bit of trepidation.
Well, if you're in the Hollywood movie business, but movies and film, television and film are becoming big businesses all over the place. And New Mexico had $500 million spent there last year. Georgia has had over $2 billion spent in filming in Georgia. It's big business elsewhere, and states are seeing this opportunity and offering incentives, and so people are going all over the place. The UK, for instance, is a big place internationally. What I think this plays into not just the headquarters move of Netflix, but some of the announcements they've had out of Europe. They have 2 offices already in Amsterdam and London. They recently announced a new office in Paris, and then a studio outside of Madrid, and then now just a recent announcement of a new office in Madrid as well. And so I think Netflix is making a serious play to secure places to do its original programming and filming around the world and be able to save on costs in the long run by doing so.
It saves on costs, and it also is one more carrot that they can offer to showrunners.
Right.
One more, because we are starting to see some of certainly the other major studios and the other television networks sort of maybe not push back so much, but basically their selling point to a showrunner is, hey, look, we've only got a few shows on our network, and we want yours to be one of them, and we're going to promote it in a way. Netflix, they're doing a fine job, but Netflix is basically going to give you a day's worth of promotion.
Yeah.
Are you surprised at all at the growth, not so much in the business and the stock, but in the growth of the production side of things? The fact that they do have, this is Albuquerque, this will get finalized, but the European operations?
In one way, yes, because at least here in America, we've been kind of trained that the big film locations are Los Angeles and New York. But Netflix is showing that people know how to tell stories, write good stories, and not all of them, in fact, a good number of them are not here in the U.S. And so I think they're taking advantage of that and as part of their global expansion, finding a lot of those international producers and storytellers.
Kudos to New Mexico, because when I was at South by Southwest earlier this year, in the trade show, there were a number of states and municipalities that had set up booths. And a bunch of them were sort of making the pitch of, hey, here's why it's good to do business in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Here's why you should come to the greater Richmond, Virginia area, et cetera, that sort of thing. And for a bunch of them, part of their pitch was to the entertainment industry. And I talked to the guy from, it was a booth, I'm going to get the name wrong, but it was essentially, it was from Florida, and it was an entertainment, essentially, wing of the state. And basically, that guy was just sad. And I was saying, our movie's not being filmed in Florida? And he basically said, Georgia is just crushing the rest of us. Georgia has rolled out so many incentives that all these big studios, they're just going to Georgia.
Yeah, they went from $60 million spent in Georgia, 2007, I think was the stat, to $2.7 billion in last year, fiscal 17. So that's quite a bit of growth. Yeah, this guy had it right.
We got earnings season kicking off at the end of this week, really starting to heat up next week. What is something you're going to be watching this earnings season?
Well, I'm really curious as to how the tariffs and the trade war with China are going to play into earnings of various companies, and even broader than that, just basic economic things. For instance, Ford management has already come out and said we're going to lose $1 billion because of this. And
Ford Motor?
Ford Motor, yeah. That was a couple of weeks ago, I think they said that. But I'm interested to see how different types of companies, the management might speak to it, how it affects their margins, how it affects their costs of inputs. Companies like Facebook or Google or, Alphabet or Netflix, probably not too much because they don't really deal in physical goods, but companies like Apple, for instance, a lot of their parts are made over in China. And so how's that going to affect their margins and what that might happen? This quarter might be a little too early to really start looking at this, except for maybe what management has to say going forward, because the $200 billion of tariff of goods being taxed now just only recently rolled out.
So in terms of the tariffs, like I'm trying to think of what gets you. Do you expect you could hear something on a conference call or it comes out in an earnings announcement that makes you go, whoa, I didn't know it was going to affect you that much. I'm now out on this stock? Or does it make you go, all right, now I just need to adjust my expectations?
More the latter. The economy and the businesses are so tied together. Take just-in-time inventory, which so many retailers now use, pioneered by Dell, and I just recently learned came about because the trucking industry was deregulated, so they could ship things more easily. But now almost everybody does just-in-time inventory. How is that going to be affected by the tariffs? How are the ports on the West Coast going to be affected by the tariffs? How are the truckers and the rail companies that move those goods inland going to be affected by the tariffs? I mean, it plays into so many different parts of business and the economy that you could be listening to a conference call from somebody you think nothing's going to hurt this company, and they say, well, our costs are going up 2% this next year because of the tariffs. And whoa, that would surprise me because I might not have realized that. But I don't think, because we're long-term investors here, I don't think that's going to make me think I need to get out of the stock. I need to get out of the investment. Companies will adjust. It's going to be painful, but companies have to adjust for all kinds of things all the time. And this is just one more headache that they have to adjust to.
Jim Mueller, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
As always, people on the program may have interest in the stocks they talk about, and the Motley Fool may have formal recommendations for or against, so don't buy or sell stocks based solely on what you hear. That's going to do it for this edition of Market Foolery. The show is mixed by Dan Boyd. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you tomorrow.